Hi, everyone. Thanks, Sharif. Yes, my name is Mario, and you may know me from the internet. I have a blog called Python by Night. I go by that handle on Mastodon. You may know me from some talks that I've done at PyCon or DjangoCon, North Bay Python, PyCascades, PyOhio, PyGotham, so on. Some of that stuff is on my blog. I recap some of my talks. Or more recently, you may know me from the tutorial I gave just earlier this week on ORMs and SQL mappers in Python, or from an art open space that I did all day, that I hosted all day yesterday, or one of the nightly gaming sessions at the Hyatt. So I'm kind of all over the place, as you can tell. Or it's possible that you've never heard of me, but that's okay. Now all of you have at least learned a little bit about me. So my talk today is nothing new, really. It's certainly remained an evergreen topic in the world of Python. In fact, my friend Dave, who's sitting over there, gave similar talks over a decade ago, and then 2 years later gave the same talk. Packaging keeps changing, and in fact, even last year there was a tutorial with a suspiciously similar name in Pittsburgh by my friends Ingve and Maria. And even this year, there's already been another talk by Russell covering a similar or overlapping topic. So yeah, let's go ahead and create a Python package from 0 to hero. All right, so this here is Lauren the fourth, to be exact, but that's another story, how she got her name. If you haven't met Lauren the fourth, you can go by the PSF booth there by the lounge area. You can hang out with Lauren the fourth. And this is also Lauren the Python in a package. Oh wait. Sure, I guess we're talking about a different kind of Python here. Fine, okay. So Python packaging is very broad. It can get very complex for somewhat newer engineers or Python developers who are kind of new to Python or maybe use Python in a different technical domain, not necessarily with a software engineering background. Sometimes the process might seem intimidating. How do I make my code available for others to use? And so that has created a problem. So again, true to the talk, we're going to start with 0. So 0 means 0 lines of code. This is in the realm of the before times, before you even have an idea of what you're going to share. So here's my first bit of advice, is to identify your problem and make sure you're able to clearly define what you are intending to accomplish with your code. The more precise you can be about communicating your intent, the likelier it is that your little program that could be belongs in a package anyway. You may wonder if your idea is too niche or too narrow, and that packaging is only for really big or important programs. But I'd like to suggest that the best libraries are actually the ones that communicate their intent in just a few sentences, and the actual size of the recording, the resulting code base is largely irrelevant. As a small example, last year I was looking for a way to resize images for my blog. So I could use responsive images, and I wanted to also generate the HTML text that would go with these images, with these different sizes, using the source set and sizes attributes. And I thought, what would it look like to solve this problem? Which takes us to the second step, which is the search. So you have a pretty good idea now of, you've defined the problem that you have, and you think, all right, I might want to create something to let others use. But I'd like to propose that the searching, the second step, is really important. If you're going to go through the trouble of packaging up your code, you got to make sure to do a little due diligence and have a little look around to see if something like this has been done already. In my case, I went on Mastodon and I asked if anyone knew of a library that could do some of the things that I just described. I also went to pypi.org, that being the official Python packaging index. I searched for package names that might match my intent. I read through some of the descriptions and tried to find anything closely matched. Like I mentioned, this step might help you decide how much work you want to put into this. And you can ask yourself, is it worth doing, creating this package in the first place if you've already seen that the problem has been solved? But what if in your search you find something that almost does what you want, but it's just missing a few key details? I would suggest to maybe check to see if it makes more sense if the project is being maintained and if it's open to contributions. You could maybe just add those features yourself instead of building from scratch. But following through on this step might give you a bunch of time back, especially if you see that this problem has been solved and there's multiple competing packages, and that can be kind of daunting for users if you add yet one more take on how to do a particular thing, and users become paralyzed by the paradox of choice. They're not sure if they could even try all these tools to see if it's something they might be able to use. That kind of gives you a foundation to even decide if what you're building is worth packaging up. So our next step is the idea. Once you've decided that, lo and behold, there's not one specific package that solves your problem, and there aren't other existing projects that you could join to or contribute to, then it's time to consolidate your idea and start making some initial decisions. Notice we haven't written any code yet. We're talking about packaging and we haven't written any code yet. But now your idea does start to take shape. So try to think about how your library might be used by someone for the first time. What should it feel like? What kinds of instructions or documentations would you want to include for someone to be able to use this tool that you're envisioning? Or what might the API include or exclude? Like you start thinking about your scope. So next, we have the preparation. It's time to prep. And there are different ways you can approach your preparation step, but I'll highlight a particular one. Have you ever heard of something called documentation-driven design? As the name suggests, it's a method that starts with the documentation. As you begin writing your documentation, certain patterns start emerging, and other requirements might come to light that you may not have even thought about previously. You can start with a README, or you can start with a more extensive type of documentation, or just some markdown files. This is a great time to start testing out your API, the ideas of how it would be used, getting a head start on one of the hardest problems in software development, which is naming things. Hopefully, while you were searching for similar packages earlier, you also took note of a project name that wasn't already taken. I did a similar thing with that issue I had with resizing images for my blog. Once I found some project names that I liked and were available, I typed several iterations of what that API might look like, and I landed on something kind of like this. That there is really just pseudocode. I wasn't really coding yet, but it kind of gave me an idea of, you know, I want to create this object, this web image object. I want to be able to run some methods. And then I started typing out what these methods might be called, what kind of mental model I could build about this particular package I thought to build. Again, I hadn't written any of the underlying code yet, but I did have a feel for the ergonomics. The bit of pseudocode also helped to anchor some of my constraints that would ultimately keep my project a little more focused. So by the time you're done prepping, your goals should become a little bit clearer. Be even sharper with the definitions of what you're trying to do, and also be aware of what you're not trying to do. So that will help maintain your scope of what you're going to do. So finally, the work. Now you finally have my permission to start writing some code. I'm just kidding. It's your life. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Live your life. But if you are following some of my suggestions up to this point, you're in a pretty good spot. The API that you're looking to implement is more or less already defined, even if you didn't fully follow the documentation-driven design paradigm. But if you've worked some of these things out with pseudocode or a README file somewhere, you can build off of that. You can use this to guide you and constrain you. It's very easy to allow scope creep, even without those pesky project managers bringing you requests from the front office. Scope creep still happens. So I won't spend too much more time on this section, just to say that writing some code, while it's important, it's only a small part of the process of creating something for someone else to use, which is why I advocate for being thoughtful from step 0, as pointed out earlier. And yes, again, this step is about having constraints. Now we move on to the actual packaging. So what gives? You came to this talk about Python packaging, and I've been going on and on like some airport self-help book about these esoteric concepts. For those of you who know me pretty well, I'm sure you're not surprised. But for the rest of you, I do want to make the case that understanding processes is in a holistic sense, is crucial. If I were to start this talk by explaining how to create an account on test.py, it would feel irresponsible for me not to talk about when and why you might even want to do that. But anyway, what is test.py? This is a place where you can test going through the motions of publishing your package to the Python packaging index. But I'm going to back up a little bit. Over here on the screen, you see a reference to the pyproject.toml file. The pyproject.toml file, I like to think of it as kind of the packaging tape that holds everything together in terms of your application or your project. These days, there's tools that do this for you, like if you use PDM or UV or even Poetry, when you type in init or start project, something to that effect, it'll generate a pyproject.toml file. I only want to highlight a couple of properties there on the file, which the project name needs to be unique. If you have a name that's already taken in the packaging index, it'll create an error for you down the road. So that's why I talked about naming things earlier. And then, as far as I know, UV's init does not, by default, include the build system property in the pyproject.toml. The build system is required. Now, there are different build systems that can be used here, including setup tools or Hatchling, Flit, UV build, and so on. They differ in the way that they approach the metadata configuration for your package. But ordinarily, if you're not using extension modules, and if you're doing this for the first time, chances are you're not. Whichever one of those backends you choose is not going to have much of an effect or be much relevant for you. But I do want to emphasize that there is an official Python packaging user guide that goes over all this in more detail. And I would also recommend to have that page open if and when you're going through this process. Now, it's not imperative that you fully understand what is exactly happening under the hood during the build process. Much of this has been abstracted away with modern tooling. Again, if you're using UV, for example, this whole setup for your package is relatively short. So again, after you've added the build system section to your PyProject.toml, you can run the command uvsync, which will prepare your project for distribution, and then use uvbuild. And this will actually create something called a wheel in a dist distribution directory, dist, which you should probably add to your gitignore file if it has not already been added. But these are the main ingredients that you need to build your project for distribution. Okay, so now we've gotten to the actual publishing. You've packaged it up. It wasn't as hard as we thought it would be. You've taped it up and you're ready to put it on the index. So I mentioned test PyPI earlier. This is where you would go. This is the website for test PyPI. What we're trying to accomplish here is we want to create an account here, and this is all preliminary. I would recommend anyone who's doing this for the first time to go to test PyPI to go through the motions of distributing your package, and then you just do it again to regular old PyPI, and it's the same process, but at least you've been able to prove that this works. So once you go to test PyPI, you create an account. Creating an account is pretty easy. We've all created an account before. And then there's a section to create an API token so that we can push our project to the index through our account. That UI looks a little bit like this. You give a name, whatever name you want, to the API token, and you select the scope. I forget the options there, but you probably just want to use entire account. There's an option to scope that token to be for anything on your account. And it should go without saying that once you create your token, just be sure to copy it and keep it in a safe place, like password manager or tattooed to your arm. Okay, maybe not that second one. I was just checking to make sure you were paying attention. The tooling you choose to use can then use this token to publish the package on test PyPI. Now, using UV, like I mentioned earlier, it would probably look something like this. The publish command is right in the CLI. UV publish. You have the argument, the token argument that will be the API token that we did not tattoo to our arm. And notice the publish URL. Here we're telling UV to try to attempt to publish this to the testpypi.org because it uses a completely separate database and account system than regular PyPI, so that's why you have to pass that through. And once you are passing the token and the URL through that command, there's a slightly less tedious way to do that. There's an environment variable called uvpublish, which I'll show later, but that's it. That's really all it took for us to publish a package, right? But like I mentioned earlier, this is a dry run, so we can just do it all over again. That's actually not the real PyPI website. You need to remove the tests from there, which I did not do to update my slides. Sorry about that. But now we can create a new account, generate a new token, make sure that you write it down somewhere, not on your arm, make sure that it's your production token, and then you would pass that token through UV to then publish to PyPI, and then you'll have your package available to pip install. There's an environment variable, which I mentioned earlier, that UV looks for, which is the UV publish token. If you have that set as an environment variable, it's even easier, because then you just need to run UV publish, and that alone will get this cool little niche app or project that you created, packaged up, and sent over to the packaging index for others to use. And if if you were diligent, other users will see that package and have the README and the documentation, which you kind of got a head start writing, and they'll know how to use it themselves. So that's it. Python's packaging story has improved substantially over the years, and it has made the process fairly accessible. Chances are anyone who's here today could, with the right information, be able to publish their packages on PyPI. If everything has gone well, you can pip install Lauren IV, my new program about purple snakes. So, I did want to highlight one note. I don't have a slide for this. I only want to present it. There's a concept called trusted publishing, which PyPI supports. It removes the need to use these manually generated tokens, but the trusted publishing can only be done through certain services. I think as of this talk, it includes GitHub Actions, Google Cloud, ActiveState, and GitLab CI/CD. If you're using other repositories like Codeberg, for example, trusted publishing is not available yet. It's a separate process that you can also follow on the documentation that I mentioned earlier, and I'll have a link available as well. But I just wanted to mention that's an additional option that improves security and also removes the nature of that token. All right, so that's it for Reels. We've learned how to go through the process from zero, from no code at all, to creating a solution that we then can share with other developers that will make it easy for them to pip install like any other library and get up to speed using your code, your documentation for any niche that you might fill. So is that the end? Well, when I first prepared this talk, I had originally planned to spend a lot more time just talking about the technical details of creating a package, examining the metadata of a typical pyproject.toml file. And I was going to run through some typical considerations about project structure and the differences between an app or an library. And I even thought about talking about the subject of wheels and what you might find in the dist directory I mentioned earlier. But the truth is, if you really want to create a package, you're less likely to turn to a conference talk than to follow a written guide, or join a tutorial with a suspiciously similar name to this talk. That would be good too. But the good news is that there are some extremely good guides for that, which I previously mentioned. The official Python packaging user guide is awesome, but there is even another one that is extremely good and covers the process in detail as well. That one is, you can find it at PyOpenSci, and it's called the PyOpenSci Python Packaging Guide. This is an excellent guide that covers much of what I talked about, but has even more details that might be relevant, say, if you're coming from a data background or an extreme beginner background. It's really all there. And when but it's much more thorough, and it covers things such as things you might want to include in your project, like documentation, licensing, a test suite, or how other contributors can get involved, which I think are all extremely important things, even if you think your library is just so niche. When you choose to share your code, you are, in a sense, entering a contract with any user who might end up using your code in the future. So creating proper documentation that guides a user is just as important as your code. That's why I started from zero. A test suite will give users confidence that your app works as expected, and a contribution guide will help them know what to do if they discover something isn't working quite as expected. And a license for your package may also serve to set expectations with your users. So believe it or not, at this point, you're a maintainer now. And it could be that your packaging journey has only just begun. So hopefully I've piqued your interest about packaging today and given you an overview of what it takes to make your project available for others to enjoy, to use, or abuse. It doesn't have to be so intimidating and so daunting. A few months ago, I wrote about my journey of creating a Python package, which you can read about on my blog there. It covers some of these same topics and provides some of the references which I mentioned earlier. But if you want to talk about packaging or art or the rise of techno-fascism and its effects on our fragile culture, feel free to come and chat. Also, go visit Lauren the 4th at the PSF booth in the expo hall, and thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Can you talk for a little bit about what updating one of these packages might look like? Presumably you would not want to have to pip install or push to PyPI every time you change something. So when you make changes to your library locally, what does that process look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that probably gets us into the territory of just CI/CD, just having a continuous integration pipeline. Thankfully, if you have certain tools that integrate with something like UV Publish, it is very, I'd say, very low effort at times, even if you are making really small changes. I think UV even includes UV Bump, which has some semantic versioning built in, and you could build tooling locally where when you make changes that you push to main, they could run a series of commands and create your distribution with ease, almost as easy as something like pre-commit. So I would actually encourage small changes to be updated to PyPI as frequently as you're making them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for your talk. A lot of the PyPI packages have a official PyPI document, the light blue nav. Is that a different work stream from making the package?
It reads from your README if you have one, and if you include the metadata in the pyproject.toml to reference the README file you're including with your project, then that will generate that PyPI documentation.
Question. Regarding the tokens, is there a way to have a temporary dynamically generated token with PyPI? That way, like if your token ever gets compromised, like it would be fine because it's like an expiring token?
I don't remember off the bat if there's an option to make the tokens expire, but you can expire them yourself, but I'd have to look into that. That's a good question.
Thank you. Nice talk. I always leave feeling inspired, but I guess my question would be, once we have set up our package and it's like on PyPI and everything, what's next? Like to get discovered, to have people contribute to it, and all of that.
I love that question, honestly. I was challenged by someone earlier in the conference about when I gave them kind of an idea of what I was going to be talking about. And I realized that there does need to be a part 2 to this talk. But what I would do is I would really start engaging with people. If you've created something that you want someone to use, you may have someone in mind. I would start with just that one person. Hey, can you check this out and give me some feedback? Or join some larger online communities that share the interest of the package. And it is more a social, it's a social activity than we really think it is. It's not that we put something up there and then it magically becomes discovered. We have somewhat of a responsibility for others, but that's a good question, and it's maybe you can find some ways to do that and give a talk, part 2 next year. But thank you for that question.
All right, thank you.